All right, so let's talk for a bit about Mr. and Mrs. Smith, right? Um, Tracy, if you don't mind, I'll wait to do the synopsis for this, right? So, Mr. and Mrs. Smith,
Huzzah!
yeah, right. So, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, right? So, once upon a time, back in 2005, there was a little movie called Mr. and Mrs. Smith, right? Which I only saw once in theaters.
Really?
Yeah, I saw it once, and I liked it. I liked it for what it was. It back then it was the sell was it's Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, right? Who
Yep. I was
even though Brad Pitt had a
a
rough
sexy thing.
2003, he had a rough 2003. Um, his career was still on the rise, right? I know Angelina Jolie was riding high off of stuff like the Tomb Raider films. Although she was in Alexander, she was in that. She was in that. She was in that, right? But yeah, the sell is Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, right? Two of the hottest actors in the game in this, right? So of course, going into this, of course, they have to sell this sex appeal, right? So that was kind of the sell of it too, right? But I dug the premise of it too, right? Where it's this married couple and each one thinking that, the partner just normal, 9 to 5 stuff,
Right.
come home, it's like that. But they realize,
Yes,
wow, they're
it's-
assassins. Oh shit, wow,
Yeah, it was a kind of dual-edged true lies kind of thing.
That's right. Yes, exactly. It was that, right? Yeah. Good reference to the True Lies stuff, right? But yeah, where True Lies, where it was, the man, the husband was the spy. In this case, is both of them were spies, right? For me, the biggest highlight was when they kind of realized that they are assassins, and there's a great scene, and you see it in this version here too, where they try to bust shots at each other, and in the living room and in the kitchen, like that moment to me is the best aspect of the show. That is the most memorable aspect of the show, right? And I think it kind of ends with them kind of making out, but again, it's a sell, right? It's them and the hot and whatnot, right? But behind the scenes though, unfortunately, you gotta remember this though. Brad Pitt was still with Jennifer Aniston, and I think I don't know if it was true on that, but I don't remember all things Brad Pitt. Yeah, rumors was going around that Brad was having an affair with Angelina
On the set.
on the set, and because of that, well, yeah, Jennifer split with Brad, right? So yeah, I have to thank the show for that. Wow, so look at that, right? But still, for what it was, though, it was entertaining, right? I enjoyed it, but I just didn't have any reason to watch it over. Maybe I should have over the years, but I don't know. I guess for me, it's just that I wasn't the biggest Angelina Jolie fan. I mean, I know she was hot back then, but I just wasn't the biggest fan. And Brad Pitt wasn't the biggest fan of him either, even though I know he starred in stuff like Fight Club and Seven. But I felt like in the late 2000s, or I should say like going into the 2010s, when his career kind of did this resurgence, yeah, that's when he really started to click with me. So stuff like Ad Astra or Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, that's when I really look at him and this man seriously can act though. It's not just, look at me, I'm hot, I'm handsome. That was his sell back in the 2000s, right? But when he got older, it's like, nah, the man can really act though. And you kind of had to look back at his career and be like, yeah, we were wrong about this guy, right? So, no surprise the man won a Oscar for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, right? But that's that. So yeah, again, never had reason to rewatch Mr. and Mrs. Smith, right? But I was surprised that we were getting this remake series, right? I was hearing it through the grapevine, and I was hearing that Donald Glover was gonna be in it. I was like, all right, Donald Glover, you know what I mean? Again, the only Donald that matters in 2024 right now. Yeah, but I was surprised, like, you in this? Because because for me, right, I think it's because you never really for me, just having seen his career grow over the years, right, both as a musician and as an actor, you'd never picture him in an action film, right? Like you would think, at some point in time he would have appeared in an action movie, or sorry, not appeared, starred in one, maybe tried his look at it, but being just being the head, no, just being the front and center of what I assumed going into this was going to be an action show is like, nah, Donald Glover, I don't know, right? But then the trailer came out. I was like, oh, that's what you're going for. Okay, so it's not just the action, but it's also on the idea of, these two spies, being in a relationship now. And I like how they flip that there. So in this case, it's not that they didn't know that they were spies. They knew that they were spies, right? but they doing this cover where they have to assume this identity of John and Jean Smith, and they are legally married, right? But at the same time, they have to do these missions, and you kind of see how that affects their relationship, right? So that is a very, very intelligent way of taking that, the 2005 film and just twisting it in a different way, right? So when I saw the trailer, I was like, yeah, this looks really good, right? And it also co-stars Maya Erskine, who
Right.
was Mizu,
Yeah, Blue Eye Samurai.
Samurai, my favorite show of
Yeah.
last year, yada yada yada. So like, hey, it's cool seeing the two of them together because I haven't seen her really act.
They were supposed to was Aquafina not supposed to be playing the part originally? Quick question.
Phoebe Waller, she was the person that was supposed to be with Donald, and then they split. And
Okay.
after a little while, it was Maya who came on board.
Right, and then I also heard too that Phoebe Waller-Bridge was supposed to
Right.
play Jean, but she had an
Okay.
issue with how the character of Jean was portrayed, because, well, just like spoiler, Jean have a lot of baggage, and that is a
Right.
flaw now, right? But I haven't seen Fleabag, right? But what I heard is that Phoebe kind of uses that as a strength. So yeah, she have baggage, and she have issues with trust issues now, but she kind of treats that as advantage now, you know what I mean? So in this case with Jean in this show here, is like, no, it's a serious flaw now, but you see how that affects the relationship, right? But I'll get to that in a bit, right? So yeah, that's how it was. So yeah, I mean, Amazon Prime put out all 8 episodes of this, and also lastly, smart call for putting this out before Valentine's Day, because I will say that yeah, I would actually recommend this in terms of like Valentine's Day viewership, man. This actually will make for a great binge on Valentine's Day, right? But I'll get to that later on, right? But yeah, before we get to Tracy's thoughts on the original film, Ricardo, do you have anything to say on the 2005 film before we?
Yeah, I remember hating it.
Oh, really? Okay.
It was just so, like, at the time it just felt like, oh, this is just performative, and the script was to be shockingly weak. And it was just, pretty people just being pretty, and they, that big supposed subversion of, oh, well, look how badass they could be, I guess. I was just not into this. This was just pure. It does totally feel like one of these crappy fluff films that was just, I just remember, I think I watched this in Movie Town Dread with my family, and I was just like watching this and be like, oh, this is what they hype about, really? Like, I was in and out about it. I couldn't care for it one way or the other. I vaguely remember it. Right, it's just like, all right, they're remaking this. I thought it was like a book or something, no. Not realizing, it's an original script. All right, I thought it was that kind of interesting. That's it. Moving on. Didn't care about these two. I think at the time they were in the news too much. I was sick of them. So that's a big part of that. Yeah, it's all of that.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, Tracy, before you get in the synopsis, you have any memories of the original film?
Oh no! Listen, I loved it. I have seen Mr. and Mrs. Smith. That's the thing. Mr. and Mrs. Smith 2005 edition is, yes, it is. For all intents and people, the pretty people. For all intents and purposes, rather, it is the pretty people. It is Brad, who was like the golden son of Hollywood for all intents and purposes at one point in time, and she was still being, weird, and all sorts of good things and bad things and weird things was happening with Angelina. So you pair these two together, you get a good movie, you get people in seats. But I liked the idea, because at the end of the day, the whole point of Mr. and Mrs. Smith is marriage can be a killer. Marriage can be a stress, and what the plot that they use for that, saying that, okay, the two of them are spies and they didn't know that each other was spies, and that both of their companies had come together and decided y'all need to be taken out. I liked that. I liked how it played out, and the music for it. How I tend to go with soundtracks and that kind of stuff. I can't remember who did the soundtrack for it, but I do remember having that soundtrack as well as the various artists' version of it. I loved it. It was fun. It was fun for what it was. I don't recommend drinking orange juice out of a broken glass. That does not make sense. But like after they mash up the kitchen and everything of the sort, it was fun. It was a good little ride. So that was my 2005 memory. Like if I'm up on some sort of digital site and it's there, or if it's on TNT or something, I'll still take the actual time to sit down and watch these two try and figure out who they are and what they mean and what it means and all that kind of good stuff. It was a vibe. It was a vibe.
All right, so yeah, Tracy, take it away. What is this new 2024 version of Mr. and Mrs. Smith about?
All right, so you got these two spies. They work for an organization. Their boss, their supervisor, is some being that is known as Hi Hi, which is a joke unto itself. And you have John and Jane Smith, not their real name. And like Sir Bailey was alluding to earlier, unlike the 2005 film, the thing here is that they go into this marriage sort of like with open eyes. They're both spies. They both know that they're working for the company. And what you have happening is that they're going to be off doing missions, and they have to figure out how to live with each other. They have a beautiful home. They have a marriage. Over the course of the episodes, they start to develop actual feelings for each other, and that brings a measure of complication. And also, one of the things that we get to see here is an expansion of the lore in terms of there are many John and Janes, and how do you play into that? So that is the general idea of Mr. and Mrs. Smith. It's a married couple, quote unquote married couple, who are spies going on missions together. It's not the most original of constructs, but the way how they do it is original, and that is the thing that I like. In terms of things that I headcanon wise I like about this, I feel like this series could be an extension of the 2005 film, in that, okay, so after the end of the 2005 film,
right.
But it's almost like this though. The two companies, in my mind, it's like the two companies realized that this is a thing that could actually happen, joined forces together and decided from now on we will pair up people to go and do things and do missions. So in the back of my mind, like that could be the evolution of the process, because how do you stop people from falling in love? At some point in time, they will eventually do that. Might as well pair them up one time and send them off to do missions. There are little callbacks I find to the 2005 film, like, small spoiler, there is another John and Jane that the couple meets, and they have been married for 5 or 6 years, and that was a running gag in the original film because they couldn't decide whether it was 5 or 6. The therapist is back. This time it is Sarah Paulson, so they have to go in therapy. What I dig about this version is that it's not sleek. It's, for want of a better way of putting it, it's very earthy. It has the espionage, it has the spycraft, but it is not this sleek. There's a scene that's running through my mind right now of Angelina at the top of the hotel, and is like diving off the 34th floor or whatever it is like that, and coming down while her hair is doing a L'Oreal commercial. It's not that, but at the same point in time, you still get that these are two people that you could possibly see actually married kind of vibe. Also, I'm going to just put this out there. The music by David Fleming is delicious. You take an already you take an already good series, and then you add David Fleming onto it, and it takes it to a whole other level. Personal recommendations: listen to Hi Hi, Meet Cute, and Snowplow. Those tend to live on my machine on repeat. But in terms of where the story goes, you can feel the chemistry between Donald and Maya. I would have loved to have seen what a Phoebe Waller-Bridges union would have looked like, especially given, for me, would have been like it's Lando and his computer back together again, kind of. Also, and this is not for, not everybody will think like this, but for me, it was kind of cool to have an Asian Black mix, as opposed to just the traditional, here's a black and white couple for, whether it is for show, for optics, for however, compatibility, as they call it. I liked the idea of the Asian and the Black couple coming together and being like they're well to do. They actually have stuff and it's going pretty good as far as the outside world is concerned. I would recommend everybody sitting down and watching Mr. and Mrs. Smith. It is one of those shows where even though Donald was involved, personally, I didn't know if I necessarily needed it. But when I saw it after the first episode, I was like, yep, okay, I am on board. I will eat, my words because it is worthy of a watch. I can't wait to see where they go next. I'm hoping that they do get a season 2 because it is good. It is like I said, it's earthy. So that's my personal feelings on Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Go give it a watch. Amazon Prime, and for me, I'm giving it 9 out of 10 because it is good. It fits into the world that the 2005 film gives. And my personal headcanon, like I said at the beginning of all this, is that this is an extension of that, but like in a different way. And I could almost see, I mean, I know they wouldn't, but I could almost see at the end of season 2, there's a retired John or a retired Jane and cut to, Brad Pitt's very older face or something like there's ways to sort of bring those two specifically back if you wanted to. But if they didn't come in, it's not like if the show is beholden onto it. It is a brilliant show on its own. But that's me.
Right. Well, I'll leave my thoughts for last, right? So, Ricardo, your thoughts on Mr. and Mrs. Smith, man.
Yeah, I dug it. It works as, it starts off, as reasonably semi-competent spies, and then they get into the feelings as, millennial losers, right? It works in that sense. It's very, very, very explicitly generational, in terms of like how these characters think or how they frame each other and how they frame the world. I have a handful of logical problems. Some of it is the usual, like action movie stuff. Like there's that opening sequence where you see, presumably a previous, Gina John Smith, getting wiped out, and she's supposed to be this competent badass spy, but she out in the open shooting. That kind of stuff,
yeah.
no?
Kind of dumb. Good point. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, whatever. It's more like, it's action movie bullshit. Nobody cares. But then other things that I had little logical issues with in terms of, I had one just getting the bad out of the way, and then I'll get into the good. But the problem is that some of the logic of the lack of transparency doesn't make a lick of sense to me in the context of this story and how it frames itself. Like really, they have to I thought it was going to make a big twist on something involving Paul Dano. I thought that's where they was going with it in terms of who doing things and who pushing buttons and pulling strings. But they didn't really do that. And like, all right, well, this don't make a lick of sense in terms of that, whatever. A couple other things was, I thought, like, again, this is the early stuff and we'll get to later. John Turturro didn't have any bodyguards. Really?
I know,
that was kind of weird.
Right? Good point. Yes.
That was kind of weird to me. But again, other than that, just these little small logic nitpicks. Overall, it's solid stuff. Earn just playing, so I call him Earn, right? Donald Glover playing Earn.
Yeah.
As if he graduated from Princeton, right? That's basically what it is. What if Earn didn't drop out from Princeton? That's what it felt like.
I see what you did there.
Yeah, he felt. I don't know. He felt too much like Earn. He didn't feel like a different character or unique here. As well, John, and they reveal his real name later. But I thought it was surprisingly. It works as Tracy was putting it, earthy. It works in the grounded sense of the conceit, right? These characters just thinking on the fly. How it works. I mean, that first episode really caught me. Where it played, and then they lay a guard down with a cake, and that's all I'll say, and that's it. And then what they do with it after is like, all right, let's see where they're going with this. Episode 6 is kind of brilliant. I thought that was really clever. Like
yes.
Yeah, with Sarah Paulson.
For Brigham McGill, Sarah Paulson to be the therapist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right, to make that work. What they make it work is the workable conceit. Again, it's very millennial. The conceit of anxiety. They make that work because you're not sure what the consequences of your failure will be exactly.
Yes.
It's there, lingering, and you're not sure. And again, the lack of transparency feeds into that. But I felt, because of the nature of the nature of the job, just the level of violence and all of this skullduggery that have to take place, I felt that could have been that could have made the character should have asked more questions. That's all I was saying. And the character was a little too loose with their behavior. Like, you let's invite this couple. You went to this couple for dinner, really? And then it was another Smith, and you trust them.
I know,
Little
right?
things like that. It's like, all a little casual here, though. But it works with the relationship, how they bounce off each other. Maya in particular is very good in terms of that. Like, she really trying to let on as somewhat distant at the beginning, but she had a BD, for lack of a better term. I just got to show she kind of dog bad, a little bit, right? A little bit. In her bounce with Donald Glover. And then Donald Glover, no, again, I was a little distracted by him, but I felt he could have been, because he feel like he was playing all over again. But their relationship and their bouncing off was solid stuff as it is. And then the last 3 episodes in particular I thought was excellent. Like, again, episode 6 was kind of brilliant. Episode 7, they bring in Michaela Cole. She was great in this.
Yes,
What they do with her is really, really clever and funny. I hope she, like, if they're doing that season 2 or whatever, she had to come back. She was great. And they did waste her completely like Disney did with Black Panther, that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But stuff like that, it is, yes, she's great. They do a beat with it. There's a really great scene with her involved with a couple teacups. Just that little human back and forth, emotional reality. That's what they try to do with this, and that's why it mostly works well. But yeah, the big reveal at the end with the older couple again. Yeah, not surprised. I was okay. That's it. As I said, the logical problems and just that little logical problems slightly held it back for me. I felt they could have just punched up the script slightly just to have less everything make a little more sense, because I felt stuff just didn't make sense in terms of like, well, why is it you're not asking more questions or being a little more careful with this? And there's the human element involved in the spy game and not giving up your life. And it just seemed to be more emotional reasons than just the hard logical reasons of survival. Because yeah, like people could track your phone, people could do all kind of things. We live in the internet age. Stuff like that. Whatever. That's just me. Rating. Yeah, I give it like an 8 out of 10. I enjoyed it for what it was. The logical little nitpicks held it back, but I really felt that they could have done just a slight punch up would have probably put it up in the score higher. For me, that's about it. And yeah, Donald Glover has given us early year material, because around this time we got Swarm, right? And that was good too. So I enjoyed it. One more. I don't mind getting a season 2 from this. I like how they ended it. How it was left quite vague, so we don't know, what could happen going forward. They had the workable anxiety and kept me on my seat for the most part. Right? The main thing with these things, it kept my attention. I was never bored, because every episode had an adventure. They had a good sense of passage of time. They made it work for what it was. Rating 8 out of 10. I dug it.
Yeah. Well, for me, I enjoyed it as well, but not as much as I wanted to, unfortunately, though. But that's not to say the show was terrible, or anything like that, right? As far as nitpicks, because I have a few as well, I felt like, okay, like I know we're not gonna go the Hollywood level like what Mr. and Mrs. Smith was going for, right? Even though, this show have, Amazon Prime backing, right? So it's like that. But still, I felt like some of the action scenes could have been better handled. Like I mentioned, one in the opening sequence, which, caught me by surprise too. But yeah, that little piece of logic kind of doesn't work at all. There's one in particular though which involves, another Jean and John, right? Without spoiling anything, the Gene and John we following the Sazi show, and again put into this mission, and they end up in a particular place. That's all I'll say without spoiling anything. Right?
And I thought that was incredibly
quickly. I'm like,
yeah, but I thought that was incredibly silly on their part. Like, dude, you listen to these people? Why? Like, to me, the only people you should be listening to at most is Hi, and even that you shouldn't trust. And that's my problem with it. I felt they could have make it. It didn't feel official enough in the conceit. And again, back in the 2005 film, you could have kind of let that slide, maybe, because remember, neither of them knew the other. Remember, every one of them thought they was leading the secret life. They just the double-edged true lies thing. But this now, you would think they would have start talking to each other about it, like, stuff like that. Whatever.
Right.
I mean, I know they had to push the story forward, but it was bothering me the entire time. Whatever.
No, well, you're right? So yeah, without spoiling anything, it leads to an action scene that just came and went so quick. I was like, wait, that's it?
Yeah.
And the way how it was shot, I was like, oof, what is that, right? So to make a long story short, right? I understand that you do not want, Donald and Maya to be breaking bones when they're doing this though. But at times, I felt like either they could have sell the physicality of the action scenes a little bit more, whether it's just, normal fighting or, shootouts or whatnot, or they could have just kind of frame the action scenes a lot better so you could get more of an impact from it now. Can understand, you don't want to hurt the talent, but at the same time, you can kind of tell, oh, that's a stuntman, or they cut it that way because,
Right.
It's like that. I felt that was like,
Yeah, but none of the action was that bad. As it was, because again, it made some realistic sense as to how these characters would operate in terms of like the violence and how guns work and who gets shot and why. Again, it's the typical you get shot on the side action movie bullshit, normal thing.
Yeah.
But I felt they still did a good job with it, especially the ending, and how the violence played itself out. Yeah, go ahead.
Right. Also too, right. So that's just to touch on that same episode with the second couple, right. While I do appreciate, right. And, when I saw the name as, for the first episode, when I saw him as the director, I was like, all right, I'm not surprised. Hiro Murai, right?
And I thought he was good. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
He was from Atlanta.
Yeah, so I know that. So when I saw that name, I was like, all right, they're going to veer into Atlanta territory, right? So as I mentioned before, the cake is like, oh, that's what they're going for, where you're thinking it's one thing, but then it becomes something totally unexpected.
Right.
And it's weird now, and it kind of throws you off guard, right? At times it works, but other times, like with that one with the couple, it kind of doesn't, because you have to you have to think of it logically. Like, why would you just follow every whim, that this couple is doing? Like the couple literally telling our heroes, yo, go and do this. And they're like, all right, yeah, cool. But again, it's supposed to feel awkward, right? And then, when it ends, right? Also, shout out, Tracy, shout out to you, right? I love how you take, just kind of making it out here, right? You take two pictures of that same moment and you put it up on IG and you compare it to work. Right. So, right. But you see, like, the payoff for that, the payoff is the joke. They're like, wow, this is like real awkward shit. They're like, what exactly happened? So they all bloody up and they're like, what? You know what I mean? So that's the joke there, it's the absurdity of it all, right? But still, it's like, but you want to, because you want to ground in the reality, is like, but yeah, why they went in the first place? So they could have just saying no, Or they could have just refused to. Like,
my thing is that
shut up.
My problem is that I don't know if it's because I watch too many spy films and I just kind of accustomed to that skullduggery. But like, it was not surprised when they revealed who they were at the end. And it's like, nothing about our surprising. I know they should have guessed that.
Yeah, the moment they reveal themselves as who they are, it's like, no, they're on shit. Especially John, I was like, yeah, you want real shit. You want real shit.
Yeah.
Like, look at you, right? But anyway, yeah, so at times the absurdity works, but other times it doesn't, right? I think it's because the show does a great job in terms of grounding things in reality, and that's why I felt, the show really shines, right? Also, what shines too is the chemistry, though, between Donald and Maya, right? It feels
they're pretty good,
so organic, though. Like, you could tell, like, you could tell like they were having a blast working on this, right? But one thing, right? Even though, yes, it is about them playing a married couple, they really do feel like friends, though. They feel like, like they will quarrel about stuff, they will agree with stuff, they will disagree on some things, right? So I do like that the show was smart enough and, heartfelt enough to, really explore what it means to be in a relationship, right? Whether, you're married or not, right? So I love how the show dives into that, right? But framing it in the context of we're spies and, we have this 3 mistake rule kind of thing, which caught me by surprise too. And we're not sure what the real mission is about. I like that. So it always keeps them on their toes, right? I like how, because of their insecurities and flaws now, you see how that kind of affects their relationship, right? And yeah, where the relationship goes up until the very end felt logical. It made a lot of sense, especially with Gina, what she was dealing with, right? Especially with her just wanting to be a career woman. She doesn't want to settle down and have kids, right? Even though John now wants to have kids, and it's kind of understandable why, right? So, I just love that back and forth though. As I say, Ricardo, that episode 7, the Michaela Cole was great. Was great. I would say though, just the moments with her, just the dialogue aspect of it is Tarantino-esque. And what I mean is that it's characters, it's archetypes, right? It's a spy who's doing a job, but he or she is talking about something that you wouldn't hear a spy talking about, because it's a human being, like, yeah, this works though, but the context of it is like, oh, what I was saying was spoiling thing. It's, I'm gonna kill you, but I'm gonna talk to you. I want to understand exactly what's going on, right? And this the conversation feels grounded, even though it is essentially spy gonna kill somebody, right? That's what I love about it. It's very Tarantino inspired, right? But I see that as a compliment, right? Supporting cast is great as well. Like Sarah Paulson was great as a therapist. I do agree with you.
Right.
Episode 6 with the therapy was great though. Just the mere fact that it's spies doing therapy though, and it's a married couple, and they're saying, oh, we're software engineers. I like how they just keep saying, they do their job. The moment where John was saying, oh, the malware, like your program had malware had me going.
Right.
Like, and I just did like, wow, like Sarah as a therapist, she buying into this. But the payoff though, the payoff I felt was totally worth it. But I was like, I had to think about like why they do that for. But then I thought about like, oh, that's why.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna spoil what it is, right? John Turturro was great as well, but I felt like that was very into Atlanta territory, very Lynchian, it's a character who seems normal, but yeah, he weird, because he have this weird kid. That's all I'll say without spoiling things.
Right.
But it kind of worked in, the conflict that John and Jean was going through, right? Ron Perlman, I didn't expect to see him there. Parker
Right,
Posey,
yeah, he was good.
Paul Dano, though, like the moment I saw him there, I was like, all right, you on shit too, because it's Paul Dano, you always on shit.
Right.
But I felt like the character could have, like, especially the final episode where it's revealed who he really was, I felt they could have framed that a lot better, right?
You're right. But it's still not clear. The way it is, I don't think it's particularly clear who he is, because again, you want to think again. Go ahead. Sorry, Tracy.
No. I was just more or less going to say you could never really tell what layers are behind his.
It was felt unclear now as it was because again, I thought they were going to do this with him, and that's not what we saw. It could just be some guy we don't know. Yeah. But he mentioned something. When he made the phone call, I thought it was he connected to John Turturro's character. I was like, wait, what? Because remember, he's a big real estate guy.
Right.
So I thought that was going on. So I had to check back. I was like, no, that is apparently not the case. Stuff like that. I don't go back and.
Yeah, it was somebody else without spoiling anything. It was
right.
And that's just to close things off, right? I'm actually a little iffy about the final sequence. Like I get what they were setting up with it, right? But I just felt like it was a little too ambiguous, right? Which is why I am, like you guys, I'm hoping that we get a second season because, they really need to clear that up, right? But if somehow, for some weird reason, this show does not get a second season, then that kind of frames the situation that John and Jean are in a much darker light, much darker perspective, because the situation that they're in right now is very insidious, right? But how it ends there is like, wow, but like there's really no hope, right? And that had me kind of going back to the beginning of the show now, and you're telling me, so this is the fate of John and Jane's, like there's really no hope for them. They're like, wow,
right, pretty much, yeah.
But then logical comment and be like, well, why they do this whole marriage stuff in the first place? Why they couldn't just fake, being a couple? Why they had to be legally married for and blah 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 blah, right? So logic holds and all that kind of stuff, right? So that's why I do hope that we do get a second season and they explain things, right? But in my mind, I tell myself, it could be this is the end, or it could be, actually no, and we'll see what happens afterwards, right? But I will not be surprised if that is actually the end, but that'll be a very, very, very dark end, right? But whatever. But yeah, as a whole though, I really enjoy this, man. It's not perfect, but it works, right? And I could also tell that, even though the show has action, it's not action heavy, right? And you could tell that the emphasis is really put more on the relationship aspect of it, right? So see it more as a comedy drama than an action comedy. That's the best way I could.
Yeah, it works more comparable to something like Barry, that kind of weird anti-dramedy kind of approach to how they're telling it. It works in that sense, for the most part.
It does, right? And yeah, there's admittedly a romantic vibe to it, right? Because again, with the chemistry that Donald and Maya just exude, right? You really feel, that bond that they have, right? And you also feel when they have their downs, when they quarrel, you know what I mean? Like it feels very real, you know what I mean? It feels very logical, the stuff that they're arguing about or whatnot, right? So I wouldn't say it's like an anti-Valentine's show or whatnot, I would say it's like a mixture of both, right? If you do plan on watching it on Valentine's Day, right? If you're just not into the season, you can still watch it and enjoy it, right? But if you're into the season, you'll enjoy it and be like, yeah, this is exactly how marriage is. Or like if you plan on getting married,
Watch it and see other people
watch that
paying,
and
man.
you'll be like,
No, I was saying watch it and see somebody else paying. It's whether you're
Right.
you're into Valentine's or not. Watch somebody else paying. It's always fun.
Yeah. What somebody else go through, drama and then ask yourself, yeah, am I ready for this? Yeah, because like me, I was watching this like, am I really ready for marriage? But like I it's not just the partner's insecurities, but I had to deal with my own too. And then she go call me out on it, boy. Like I know, but at the same time, I could kind of relate to John with the stuff that he wants, right? But I can understand why Jane feels the way she feels too, right? But I like, it's just beautifully flawed, and I like how they just kind of come together in this show, right? So rated wise for me, like to decent 4 to 5, man. It's worth checking out. And yeah, I mean, well, Donald really came through with another solid show as well. And just the chemistry he have with Maya is it's just magnetic in my opinion, right? They are the ones who really sell this show though, and it absolutely works, right? But then on top of all that, do you really have some smart, very intellectual writing as well, and some solid direction as well too, right? And I should mention too, the score by David Fleming is great as well. How best to describe it? It's kind of doing the sort of romanticized spy music, like what you would hear like in a 60s Bond film, but in a more contemporary kind of way, but it's also trying to do the
That is exactly it.
Yeah, it's trying to do the kind of laid back downbeat kind
Yeah, that
R&B
Avengers kind of
ambient
feels it.
vibe. Or the Avengers.
Yeah,
The Avengers.
The Avengers, right? Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
As
Yes.
British, for those of you who don't know what we're talking about as a British,
Yeah, Emma
I
Peel,
assume
Emma
we're
Peel
talking
and-
about.
Yeah, the British
Yeah.
show, and then there was the movie that people hate.
Yeah, the terrible movie. But
Whatever,
yeah.
whatever, right? But yeah, it has that kind of vibe to it, right? But yeah, I would say it is certainly worth checking out. Again, for Valentine's, binge it. It's about 5-6 hours, binge it, and then
Right.
go with your partner if you're by yourself and do whatever afterwards, right? But yeah, it's still worth checking out. But even if you don't plan on watching on Valentine's, it's still worth checking out, man. I can actually see this maybe showing up in my best stuff by years end, or maybe as an honorable mention. But yeah, for sure, this is one that I'm gonna remember by years end, man. So yeah, definitely recommend checking out Mr. and Mrs. Smith, the series, not the movie.